Fake, copy, counterfeit, replica are the names people call them. You can buy them all around the world and they're getting better and better. And gone are the days when a fake watch was just something you picked up from a market on holiday and wore for a few days until one of the hands fell off, usually within a few weeks. That level of rubbish still exists for sure, but the counterfeiting industry has become incredibly sophisticated in recent years, to the point where you can now buy a replica Rolex or Patek Philippe that looks and feels almost exactly like the real thing. Now, this is an unavoidable consequence of the explosion we've seen in the demand for luxury watches, especially Rolex sports models. When waiting lists for a new Rolex watch stretches into the years, and any that are available out there on the secondary market can be changing hands for more than double the retail price, that creates a market for serious fakes that themselves can cost into the thousands. There's no shortage of great videos on how to spot a fake Rolex on the internet and here on YouTube with common tips, but I've noticed that a lot of the new videos miss out on some really obvious ones that no one seems to mention, and I want to share those with you because they've helped me sniff out the bad ones in the past. So let's get into it. I'm Marcelo from Prestige Watches, and my passion is helping watch enthusiasts with their watch buying and selling goals. I like saving people hassles and headaches and their valuable time when it comes to buying and selling their watches. My mission is to share my knowledge and guide watch lovers through the different processes and help them avoid pitfalls and perils in buying luxury watches, which can be fun and enjoyable, but there are also a lot of risks. Firstly, I'd like to mention that I'm strongly against the buying and of course the selling of counterfeit watches. It's illegal, dangerous, funds organised crime in a world full of dirty money and forced unethical labour. It hurts the watch industry by stealing revenue from genuine brands. It's a waste of money and reflects badly on the owner because fake watches are for fake people and it can heavily dent an owner's reputation. Secondly, I'd like to mention that there are two levels of Rolex fakes or copies. Lower cost fakes that I call holiday special editions, costing anything from £10 or £20 to £80 or £100. And then we have the super clones, which sounds quite scary, doesn't it? Like a huge killer hornet or an evil attack force in Star Wars. And rightly so, you should be scared of them, because sometimes they even have professionals in the industry struggling to tell them apart from the real ones. Counterfeiters tend not really to make replicas of vintage Rolex as mass-produced clones, tended to focus more on modern Rolex watches. But let me know in the comments if you don't agree with this and you do think counterfeiters would make replicas of maybe old Rolex, James Bond Big Crowns or Paul Newman Daytonas. I'd love to know. So how can you tell them apart? We hear about genuine Rolex watches having smooth, sweeping second hands and copies do not, having more of a jittery motion, not necessarily quartz versus mechanical, but just more jittery in general. But not everyone knows why this is. Modern Rolex watches beat away at 4 Hz, which is 28,800 VPH or vibrations per hour. A watch ticking at 4 Hz makes 4 oscillations per second or 8 semi-oscillations per second. Now there are 60 seconds in a minute, so this watch would tick at 480 semi-oscillations per minute. Multiplying the 480 vibrations per minute by the 60 minutes in an hour yields the 28,800 VPH figure. Now, since this watch ticks 8 times per second, a chronograph function in a 28,800 VPH watch can time events to the nearest 1/8 of a second. Make sense? Confusing, I know, but hopefully that makes sense. Now, most holiday special edition copies will have movements with a more typical lower beat rate of 21,600 VPH vibrations per hour, which is 3 Hz. Now this is like an old vintage Rolex or a more basic entry-level mechanical watch, but not like a modern Rolex, because 28,800 VPH is a more sophisticated movement some cheap clones wouldn't have. And this difference in vibrations per hour is the reason for the difference between the smoother second-hand sweep and a stuttering appearing one, because 28,800 VPH has 8 little ticks of the second hand per second, so it looks very smooth, and 21,600 VPH has 6 little ticks of the second hand per second, so it looks a little more jittery. For comparison, a Zenith El Primero with 36,000 VPH beat rate, which is 5 Hz, has 10 little ticks per second, so it's super smooth. And a vintage watch with an 18,000 VPH beat rate, which is 2.5 Hz, has 5 little ticks per second, so it's considerably more jittery. Make sense? Okay, it's worth mentioning that super clones would most likely have the 28,800 VPH for sure, but there's zillions of fakes out there that would not. So this is the first red flag for me and is check number 1. I use a time grapher, which most professionals in the industry and hobbyists would have, and you can get your hands on low-cost phone and app ones, and you can use a time grapher to check the beat rate of the watch. And it doesn't need to be a professional one or an expensive one, but I've caught out several bad guys in the past on this check alone. Check 2 is that I also use my time grapher to check beat error readings of the watch. Now, unless the watch has been massively abused or damaged, a modern Rolex watch will have a self-imposed strict standard of -2 to +2 seconds tolerance per day, which is a tolerance specific to Rolex. Now, even a plus or minus 5 to 10 second error isn't too crazy, maybe the watch just needs a service, but the fake watches that I've tested have movements with beat errors more like ±10 to 20 seconds, or even ±30 to 40 seconds. And again, this is an instant cause of concern for me and is a big red flag. My third check is to listen to the sound of the tick. And this is a quick instant check that you can do as the watch just ticks away. And I'm talking about the actual sound of the movement, the noise that the watch makes, the internal engine that drives the watch. Fakes have a very basic sounding tick-tock, a ticking sound, something like this. Whereas a modern Rolex from the last 20 or 30 years will have a much more advanced sound, the sort of sound you might expect from a world-leading high precision bit of technology. It sounds more like, got a prop. Hopefully you can hear that, but it's a very different sound to a regular tick-tock of a normal basic watch movement. Not just because the beat is faster, 28,800 VPH, but there's a gentle mechanical sounding chime within the ticking, and not a basic tick-tock that you might get on an off-the-shelf movement. It's very hard to explain, but it sounds more premium owing to the advanced technologies used in Rolex movements, such as the Parachron Blue hairspring and any other high-end technology that's powering the watch. And this would be very hard to replicate with a basic copy movement. So you can tell a fake, even a good one with a decent ETA movement, from a real Rolex by this very distinctive sound. And I can hear this sound really bright and clear when I wear my Rolex in bed, beating away in the silence of the night. Okay, a fourth quick check to sniff out a fake is to see if you can easily take the case back off the back of the watch. If you can take it off just using one of these little airball things, or even with your thumb, it may be a fake, as a modern Rolex requires a specialist tool, something like this, to take off the case back. But no, this isn't the case for vintage Rolex watches, but if I'm wrong about that, please let me know in the comments. On the fakes I've ever checked, it's true, I can easily remove the case back, whereas certainly I can't remove the case back off any genuine Rolex without this specialist tool. Now, my fifth check is a bit more sophisticated, and it does involve removing the case back of the watch, which on modern watches requires that specialist equipment. And this won't be for everyone. I recommend this is left to watchmakers and professionals with experience, as mistakes in taking case backs off of watches could be disastrous. I check to see if the balance wheel on the movement of the watch has little adjusters called Microstellar nuts on the balance wheel. These are highly specialist bits of technology from a world-leading company, and a fake factory, that I call a factory, making a watch would not be able to replicate this feature on a clone due to its complexity. And I am going to geek out a little bit here, so bear with me, I apologise. In 1957, Rolex launched a new generation of movements, the 1500 calibers, equipped with gold Microstellar screws on the balance wheel. Today, these screws have been replaced with gold Microstellar nuts. This enhancement in the technology offered new performance of their movement. The regulating organ is the beating heart of a movement and is amongst the most important parts of the watch. And it's made up of the escapement and the oscillator, and it defines the speed at which a watch runs. And it will come as no surprise that Rolex have developed their own solution in this field. There are two main ways of regulating a mechanical movement. The most common way consists of using a regulator mechanism. The active part of the hairspring is lengthened or shortened, and the other solution is using a free-sprung balance where the length of the hairspring remains the same, but watchmakers change the inertia of the high-precision machine balance wheel. Now, it's fitted with the two pairs of Microstellar nuts, and they adjust the nuts, affecting the weight balance for improved poise. This is the high-grade solution used by Rolex, and it's super advanced because free-sprung balances improve precision by eliminating certain errors, and it's way above my head. I can't pretend to know about it. And these signature Rolex gold adjustment screws allow for precise micro-regulation, and adjusting these, always in pairs, towards the inside reduces the inertia of the balance for a rate gain and vice versa. So authentic Rolex watches on more recent models since the 50s have these regulating screws. Fakes most likely won't, as they're just too hard to counterfeit. I'll leave some links to my favourite how to spot a fake Rolex videos in the comments for quick reference, but I'll finish up by saying this. When checking for a fake, you must inspect the fine details. You have to look for and expect world-class quality. With Rolex watches, things are done the Rolex way, and anything other than super high precision every single time should set off an alarm bell. Because as they say, the devil is always in the detail. In all of the common methods that you will see in the how to spot a fake videos, one theme always reoccurs, and that is extremely high quality. Their intensely meticulous process and quality control doesn't leave room for error, any error, down to the last detail of the watch. And that's why they have the reputation that they have, because they've earned it. Oh, except maybe the Rolex Air King that had an applied 9 marker instead of a 3, and I'll leave a link to that in the comments. Now, I've handled enough Rolex watches to have first impression feelings of the finishing quality in the hand. And when you've handled enough Rolex watches, you just know kind of instantly the smooth buttery metal and the high quality finishing of a genuine Rolex. And I used to play a game with my dad where I'd hand him a watch and he would close his eyes and switch into like a Jedi Master state of Zen, where he would cradle the watch like a baby bird in his big hands and inspect all over it with his fingertips, scouting around like little machines, inspecting every corner and edge, trying to sniff out imperfections. And I used to try and fool him with which is the real and which is the fake. And he would always get it right just by the finishing of the watch. And this is because real Rolex watches have world-class finishing, no sharp edges or pointy lugs or poor finishing on any part of their watch. And if you come across a watch that has coarse engravings, rough edges on any part of their watch, red flag. When trying to spot a fake Rolex, quality will ultimately be the deciding factor. And if there's any aspect of the timepiece short of perfection, you can be confident it's most likely a fake. On the dial, you can use an eyeglass to inspect the small details that you wouldn't be able to see with the naked eye. Is the logo well applied? Is the date perfectly centered? Is the font smooth and without jagged edges or interruption? Look at the watch's hands. Are they smooth and rounded on the edges or roughly cut? It's details like this that often set apart the real ones from the fakes. Is the Cyclops lens precision applied? And look at the finishing on the crown. The craftsmanship should spare no detail, no rough edges, no wonky finishing. The weight of the watch should be premium. The engraving of the serial number should be sharp and crisp and precision engraved with perfect alignment, clean, not messy. And if you're brave enough to look inside at the movement, the same attention to detail goes. And of course you can do a visual inspection of the watch's movement to an online visual reference check. Do they match? Do they look the same? A fake will certainly not. And also, don't be fooled by paperwork. There seems to be this assumption that if a watch comes with official papers and its documents, it must be authentic. Not only are papers much easier to replicate and forge than watches, but there's no guarantee that the papers actually belong to the watch in question. And remember, a fake may look a little like a Rolex, but it won't feel like a Rolex and it won't sound like a Rolex. Okay, so now you know how to spot a fake Rolex. You're now equipped with some extra knowledge and tools that will help protect you from buying a counterfeit watch and spotting a fake. These tricks, I hope, should come in handy for sure. If it doesn't feel or sound like a Rolex and have the perfect detail and finishing of a Rolex and precision timing, then red flags. And I hope this video provides you some insight. Okay, so what about you? Have you ever had a bad experience with a fake Rolex? Have you ever nearly bought one but sniffed it out in time? Did I miss anything? Does anyone have any other tips or tricks that you can share? If so, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you got any value from this, please like it by hitting the thumbs up button. And if you want to watch more industry and watch business related videos, please subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on regular tips. And if you've got any comments or questions for me to cover any other topics, please let me know in the comments below. Honestly, as always, I'd love to hear from you. Do head over to my website and see what watches I have for sale, and there's a really good free download there as well, full of useful tips. It's called A Watch Collector's Guide to Buying and Selling Luxury Watches. Head over there and download it. I'm sure you'll find it useful. And finally, if you're looking to buy a new watch, I'd love to help, so get in touch with any questions. If I haven't got the watch you're after, I can source it for you. Cheers, and see you on the next one.